Good evening and welcome to the March edition of the Poetry Playhouse open mic. And this is a very special one because it is the 5th-year anniversary of our switch to Zoom, um, uh, March of 2020. Jules and I had been hosting an open mic at a local brewery, Cactus Brewing, just down the road in Bernalillo. And then we had then everything changed and we had to switch to Zoom. So tonight we've invited some hosts of very well thought of open mics from across the country to share their experiences with that. And we'll get started with that in just a second. I did want to acknowledge the passing today, very sad news that Gary Worth Moody, an extraordinary Santa Fe poet, had died, I think yesterday or this morning. And our sympathies go out to his family and friends and to the whole poetry community in New Mexico and beyond. And I thought I'd start with reading a poem from his book, The Burnings, from Three Ataus Press, 2019, and which is again an amazing book with incredible historical sweep as well as um, skill and virtuosity and feeling.
Then you can open this up. Okay.
Yeah.
And then the audio is here.
Please mute if you're not. Okay. Thank you. So I wanted to start with reading a poem from Gary Worth Moody's book, The Burnings. And this is called Swallows Work the Traffic on Cerrillos Road. Illuminated by road-signed violence of high desert dusk, split-tail swallows, hazard nymphs, hatched from roadside remnants of abnormal rains. The small orange bellies of the birds comet through crazed dark for mayflies and moths. For a moment, as throttled traffic waits for the light to change, it is as if all the stars are falling, all souls consumed by the feeding frenzy of small things on smaller things. Somewhere beyond this domed glare that veils the night, one star devours another. Beyond event horizon, the sun is burning out. We are waiting. That's Gary Worth Moody.
Sweet.
And if we could, Jules, highlight the other featured people and we can start the conversation. Okay, I see 4 people on my screen anyway. So I was starting to talk about the change here, and of course, similar things happened all across the world. We just the last Tuesday of February in the last Tuesday in February 2020.
Hold on a second. I'm muting people.
All right, thank you.
All
right.
I'm just trying to see who's making the noise here.
Does not happen that often.
Well, I think I know. Well, I know everybody on this list except, is there anybody in the room, John, that you're not familiar with?
I can't see everybody at this point.
So. Well, just like in the, okay. All right.
Anyway, let me go ahead and
You go ahead and I'll mute everybody.
yeah.
Okay.
Um, so we were doing, we had a great kind of last hurrah party at Cactus Brewing with Lauren Camp, who's now the state New Mexico State poet laureate, and incredibly talented younger poet Nate Maxon, to a full house because there'd been a band there, and and then. March 1st, we did a workshop at the Playhouse with Bill Nevins and I talking about the poetry of Paul Muldoon, who is expected in New Mexico the following month, which of course never happened. And you know, uh, Jules' book launch was postponed. Mine was postponed. We published Colleen Powderly's book from Rochester, New York. Also that reading tour never happened. So all of this, uh, was catastrophic, but in some ways would have been a lot worse except for Zoom, because suddenly we had a whole new community, a whole new group of people, and we started ours at the end of the last Tuesday or last Wednesday or something like that of March 2020. So that's how it happened with us. And I wanted to turn maybe to Sandy first with Cultivating Voices Live, which, as I understand, I could be wrong, but I think that was a completely new Zoom creation, right? Can you tell us how that came about?
Well, first of all, thank you so much, John and Jules, and to my other hosts here. I have such respect. I've gotten to know and meet many of you in person by this point, and it's just been incredible. And yes, it all started back in, for me, early March of 2020. I had gone to San Antonio for the Associated Writing Program's annual conference, which was not very well attended because lots of people decided not to go. So it was almost like the size that I remembered it when I used to go when I was in grad school in the 90s. It was just only like maybe a few thousand people. And when I came back, I had my first book, Boats for Women, had come out in 2019. And my sister called me and she said, look, all the musicians, all their gigs are gone, and all the things that you've set up for your continuing your book
Mm.
touring are gonna disappear within a few weeks. And so she said maybe we should start an open mic, and just like the musicians do. And I said, I'm the last person that should do that. I hate technology. And she said, well, you just bring the poets, I'll take care of the rest. And we started on our first reading was on Sunday, March 29th. And I had just invited people. We used Facebook Live in the first few months.
Right.
It was extremely messy. People had to come on individually. We would sit there. And by that point, I was stranded in Missoula, Montana, so I wasn't even in my own home. And my good friend's mother, my good friend Liza Rognes, we were visiting on spring break. We got stranded there for 6 weeks. So really, Cultivating Voices live poetry originated in Anita Rognes's living room in Missoula, Montana, until we were able to go back to Washington, Olympia, Washington, and continue there. And it was messy and exhilarating, and our models, the only two that we could tell on Facebook were the open mics that we found, or Kai Coggin's Wednesday Night Poetry, which didn't miss a beat, longest continuing run open mic in the country, She did not miss it. She did not miss a beat. And Not the Time to Be Silent out of Limerick, Ireland. Those were kind of our first beacons. But I think I was at Cactus in early April. I think the first time I was with you was in April. So
Yeah, we continued with the name Cactus
yep.
for like 2 years. Then suddenly, well, maybe we're not going back to Cactus. Maybe we should change the name.
Yeah, so we went from Facebook Live, and then by the summer we moved to Zoom. And I have to say, those first weeks, so the folks that joined us, what troopers they were, and from all over the world, because I published with Salmon Poetry in Ireland, I was able to like immediately bring the Irish poets, and we set our program at a time that would make it hospitable for people in the European time zones in particular. But we also had poets immediately, like from um, India, Bangladesh, New Zealand. So it just started to grow, and I was just flabbergasted by how it continued to take off, and incredibly grateful.
Yeah. And I really liked that time zone thing that you did. It was very thoughtful doing there's a reason why we couldn't do that. And we have the 7 p.m., which kind of excludes the British Isles and Ireland as well. So but anyway, yes, my first memory of a Facebook Live poetry reading, aside maybe from yours, was Michael Zernecki from Foothills, and he did a Facebook Live reading for our good friend Martha Treichler, Black Mountain College alum, and someone hacked it, so the weird wizard hats flying all around her head, which was really funny, but a little disconcerting at the same time.
Yeah, I should just add one other thing that I think is really interesting too about, what continued to happen was, people would continue to find out about us. We have a corresponding Facebook, now Meta, group, and so that continued to populate. We had people sign up the Thursday before the Sunday reading, and because when we switched to Zoom, people still did not know how to use Zoom. You're one of the things you had to commit to if you were going to come onto our program. And back then, in those early weeks, we didn't have all our different formats that we have now, our different programming. It was 3 hours, 12 poets, 15 minutes apiece, because we were really trying to showcase a good portion of a person's new book, because we knew there was going to be no way for them to get the word out about their poetry, and the presses. And we were really mindful of wanting to do what we could to help the individual poets and the presses stay,
Which is so
continue to
important.
exist.
Yeah.
So my sister did tutorials with every one of the 12 to teach them how to do Zoom
Yeah.
for well into the fall.
Yeah. Elizabeth Ann. Yeah.
Yeah,
Wonderful.
Elizabeth Ann. Yeah.
Wonderful. I want to turn for a second to the Brownstone poets, Patricia and Roxanne. And I believe Brownstone Poets was a long established open mic before the shutdown, correct?
I'll give you the history.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, it still is a safe space for a diverse community for queer, BIPOC, Latinx, and women, and we still are, and we welcome poets to promote their books and read poetry. The history: we're at Park Plaza in a restaurant in Brooklyn Heights, about 15 and a half years. We used to have it on last Saturday of the month at 2:30, and our last in-person reading was on 2/29/2020, leap year. That's an unlucky year. Okay, and we put out an annual anthology. We began in 2008, and went perfect bound in 2016 on Amazon and in bookstores. And our anthologies consist of we don't we don't want, it's of the poets who support the series and the three featured readers we have for that specific year. You know, we don't accept unsolicited sorry, my mouth. Solicited people. Okay. And my present staff is Mega Sued, the editorial staff, Mega Sued, Carrie Magna Wagner, and Roxanne Hoffman, who's my Zoom Meister, my left arm, my right arm. And we had previous features like Cornelius Eady, Martina McGowan, J.P. Howard, and we had laureates come on like Talina Lachelle Queen, Rescue Poetics, and George Wallace. And after our last reading back in 2000, back on February 2029, 2020, I had to cancel everything. And then I decided shortly after, I started the lockdown poetry on Facebook. There was an online at 6 o'clock, we would come on and I would start the thread on the event and people would post. And we did this for several months until Roxy came to the rescue. She saved Brownstone Poets. She suggested that, why don't we do Zoom and we can start for October.
Yeah.
And she saved Brownstone Poets, and the rest is history. You can ask her about Zoom. Take it away, Roxy.
Yeah, I'm going to
Yeah,
ask
well,
you about
I think
Zoom,
the
right?
Zoom added a lot more than was available when we did it in Brooklyn, you know, because other people from other countries, from other locations could join. And didn't have to worry about the commute. We had it at a restaurant, which meant people had to buy food, you know, like a minimum. And if you have a bar, there's usually a 2-drink minimum. So the money that we collected also could go, we continued to collect. She used to charge $5 there. We continue to charge $5 now, which continues to go to support the anthology that's put out once a year, but also to help pay the features. So the people that get featured get part of the money that we collect. So we worked out a system so we could have a 2-step process where people could make their $5 donation to the event and then register and get a link. And the other thing is we had heard about Zoom bombing.
Yeah.
So we have a very safe way for people to register and get a unique link. And we tell people not to share it. So this has worked out very well for us.
Yeah. And I want to get into a little bit of that later. Since Patricia mentioned some of the other people who help out, I think Sandy mentioned her sister Elizabeth Ann helped out a lot, and then we should also mention 2 other people. So if you want to give a shout out, Sandy.
Yeah, definitely. Once my sister, because she's not really that interested in poetry, she said, I don't really like poetry. I need to go start doing other things. I had met Don Krieger through Susanna Case, a person who was coming onto our program, and did a reading with him. And then he said, I'll be happy to help you, transfer over to Zoom. And then a very dear friend of mine that I hadn't been in contact with for over 10 years, we'd gone to graduate school. So we met in the Facebook Live after like 10 years. Kim Ports Parsons, the 2 of them now are, they're my left and right hand and everything in between. Yeah, it does really take a lot behind the scenes to create these safe spaces for people. Don takes care of the technology, the security aspect, and Kim does all the promotional material and to get the poets here. So
Yeah, thanks. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I want to turn to go to Boston for a second and say hello to Chad. And Stone Soup is the oldest open mic in probably in Massachusetts, right? Maybe all of
It's
England. So
I think there are some New England like poetry club gatherings, there are like one or two others that might have been going for a little longer, but certainly the longest running independent gathering outside of any academic or institutional influence. It started out with Jack Powers in 1971. He passed away in 2010. I had been running it. Well, I'll be celebrating my 20th year anniversary of helping to organize this and host it in September of this year, September 2025.
yeah, yeah.
And today is the actual anniversary of Stone Soup turning online. I think there was a boast saying that at the time I had joined in their 35 years in existence, they had like 17 locations. When I first took it over, we were gathering at the Out of the Blue Art Gallery on Prospect Street in Cambridge. And that went well for a while until Cambridge rents and upset and agitated landlords caused the gallery to move to a very temporary location in Central Square. They let them live there rent free for a while, but then they knew that the rent was going to go up to like 10,000 a month. So it was one of those fun while it lasted 2-year runs. And then Stone Soup was struggling for a place for a while. We were at a coffee shop that was open for about 3 or 4 months, then closed. We were at St. Paul's Cathedral, we're located in downtown Boston proper. And then when COVID just hit, we were starting our latest tenure at the Assemblage Gallery as part of the Fort Point Arts Community in Seaport. The more and more we were moving, the more the locations were getting very difficult. For anyone who doesn't know anything about Boston, the Seaport area, Seaport is kind of like the new Manhattan. They're trying to really make it the modern, hip Boston, and it's almost inaccessible by any conventional mode of transportation. There's no parking, and it was more and more difficult for people to go there. So we were having a bit of a small crisis before the COVID hit. And it turned out slipping into online conferences like this kind of fit me like a glove because I was still working my job, and at my job, I'm considered essential at a hospital. And at my job, I used to be in charge of conferences that were nationwide. I used to host, take minutes, send out links. So I was working with programs that predated Zoom, and Zoom seemed like a godsend to me. If I had only had the options of Google, I don't know if I would have used it because there's a lot of things I don't like about the Google system. But Zoom
Skype
was amazing. But Zoom was amazing, and I had the extra benefit of another series called from Tim Gager. Tim is a fiction author and poet. He hosts the Dyer literary series, which actually a couple of years prior retired, and because he had nothing to do during lockdown, he decided to bring it back, and that's continuing to this day as well as an online presence. And I was lucky to have him because when Stone Soup went on for the first time, 5 years today, March 18th, we got our first Zoom bomber. And even though it fit me like a warm glove, I still didn't know how to use it entirely properly, and I inadvertently made the Zoom bomber the host. So, and that's when basically Tim had to take over for me, saying, "Abandon ship. We gotta get out of here. Start a new link. Get a new link out." And that's what we ended up doing.
Well, that is an auspicious beginning.
Somewhere I have a video that my friend Jason had taken, like showing what was going on and what they were drawing on the wallpaper and everything. And I'm like, oh my God. And we just finally got out of there, the nightmare that it was. But thankfully, I was a little more conservative. The Zoom bombers look for the link, the actual Zoom link. But if you give them an extra page or an extra step, they won't do it. The trolls are very lazy.
Now, is there any in-person Stone Soup now, or is it all online?
We went back online for a little bit. The gallery, who initially closed down, wanted us back, and the atmosphere and the environment changed all around Boston, as it has been for a long time. And I knew where we were getting in trouble when we were going to be in trouble when the head of the gallery started asking the poets to make donations for the gallery because she was hinting about money issues. And I'm sorry, but if you're relying on poets to bail you out financially, honey, you're no disrespect, but honey, you're in trouble. You're trying to squeeze two stones to make into a bigger stone, and then trying to squeeze blood out of it. It's just not going to happen. So we ended up leaving there, and we went back online, and it's been kind of a boon given in my personal and professional life. It'd be very hard for me right now to even meet once or twice a month. We had to celebrate our 50th anniversary online, which was a blessing and a sad one at the same time because there were so many people who were, some people were not able to make it. Some people were worried about their health, even in 2021, and some people had moved away. Boston has not been kind to the art scenes or to people making less than 150 a year.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Billy Brown also is an open mic host of many years. His Fixed and Free is the oldest continuously running open mic in Albuquerque, probably in New Mexico, and Billy also, like Chad, Billy is also chosen to stay with Zoom instead of in person. So I'd like to hear a little bit, Billy, about how you got online on Zoom and how and why you chose to stay with it.
Well, I'd like to echo gratitude to Jules and John. Thanks so much for bringing us together. It's an interesting conversation. Long before Zoom happened, long before the pandemic happened, I started Fixed and Free in 2008 after a 5-year run of a group called Central Avenue ended in 2007. And Central Avenue was sort of my poetry home. And after it disbanded, I tried to find some other groups to attend, and they didn't last long or whatever happened. And so I figured if it's going to happen, I better do it. So I started Fixed and Free. It's called Fixed and Free because we started in a bicycle shop, which was called the Fixed and Free Bicycle Shop, which I think means no brakes, no gears, or something like that. No, I'm not a bike rider, so I don't know exactly what a fixed and free bicycle is. So we ran there for a little under a year, and then we moved to a really nice spot. And when COVID hit in March of 2020, it was the month that I was planning to host a sort of memorial reading for. Remind me.
For
Stuart
Warren. Yeah.
And who had died recently. And he had been a big part of Fixed and Free when we were, face to face. And he had helped put together the first several anthologies that we edited and published of Fixed and Free poets. And so we canceled the March meeting, which was to honor him. And then that was taken up a little bit later by John and Jules. But right away in April, I started Fixed and Free online on Zoom. Mm-hmm. And haven't really turned back. We've had one every month, except I don't do it in November because it conflicts with Thanksgiving. But we've had it every other month since then. And I plan to continue it online, although occasionally when somebody's visiting from out of town, like Sandra Yannone or Josephine Loray, and I think I have a couple planned readings this year that will be face-to-face, which are basically book release parties for for a couple of people who've published new books here in Albuquerque. So, yeah, I plan to stick with it. I think the main reason I want to stick with it is the main advantage of Zoom is that I get participants from all over the country and from Canada and occasionally from India. And so
Definitely. Yeah. Mhm.
it's just wonderful to have expanded, all over the country and slightly around the world.
Mhm.
And
It's
so
been
that's why I'm going to
extraordinary.
stick with it.
Yeah, it's been extraordinary. Yeah, amazing. Um, Jules, I was wondering if you could spotlight yourself as well, because I can't see you anyway. And of course, Jules has been amazing because she takes care of all the technical aspects and most of the publicity as well, and as well as having a full-time job and just getting her PhD. So anyway, um, Jules, maybe you could. I want to talk a little bit more about that question of security. A couple of people have brought that on of Zoom bombers or other issues with security, and I know we've only had one trouble once with Zoom bombers or hackers in 5 years, which is pretty good, I think. But
Phenomenal.
what kind of precautions are?
Yeah, I guess we're lucky so far. I really like Chad's comment. I mean, Zoom is just out there. It's a new thing, and somebody figures out how to hack it. But that's always a
Inevitable.
concern. Yeah. And which is why we have a waiting room, which is why we have pre-registration. It catches most people, although there still will be people that register. And I don't know everybody's name all the time. So it takes, for me as a host, it distracts from me concentrating on the event. So I prefer to have smaller groups and just people I know. Or if you have a separate host, it's great because then they can sit there and worry about letting people in or who's who and that kind of thing. So I prefer in-person open mics just because I like being up on the stage. I think people learn how to use a mic or how to project, how to see the audience. But then on the other hand, Zoom can be very equalizing because we're all little boxes and you can hear people better a lot of times. You can turn on closed caption. We had one event where we had sign language and the deaf community, which
We
was
had Eddie
great.
Swayze, who's an ASL
Mhm.
poet from Rochester, New York.
And you can record, which is great to have the archive. Of course, we never recorded anything before that. But now with our back porch readings and other readings, I'll record it I'll just open a Zoom link and just use it for recording and not broadcast it. So it's been a really easy way to record things and archive things.
And
It's
Jules,
been our biggest boon as Stone Soup. Not just that, but also for the Boston Poetry Marathon,
oh,
which had to go online and exclude and in lockdown for at least a couple of years, and we were able to bring together people who might not normally have been able even to show up in person, even without the pandemic as a factor. And that's been very good for Stone Soup's history. Spanning 50 years, you're going to get a lot of people who've moved away. And the West Coast was where a lot of some of the older poets had left, whether it was John Landry, who I believe is also in New Mexico, or the
he's
late
in
Gary Hicks, who
Albuquerque
moved to
now. Yeah.
Oakland.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Eric Tate, who was I believe, in upstate New York, and Eric Tate, he was someone who had been with Stone Soup for a while, and it was through that we were able to not only reunite with them, but also give them a forum and archive their performances. I've been lucky, very fortunate as hell to have not only my own personal archives, but to have an ongoing YouTube library of all the readings. Before it was sporadic and recording and editing and putting out work was starting to get a little much for me. So the very easy, unedited, it can be a little freakish sometimes, but people do people do enjoy that and people do appreciate the timestamp and the archives. It's
Ed, what is the name of your YouTube channel?
I just go by my name. I've never called it anything else.
And
I
Jules
should probably
also
call it something
just goes
else.
by her name, Jules.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I'd like to
And it's
speak. I'd
linked.
like to speak to that too. At
Sam.
first we didn't record, and maybe what's a little different that I didn't mention was we had readings every single Sunday
Yeah. Yeah.
for almost
Extraordinary. Yeah.
almost a couple years. We took like the only week we took off was like the holiday year in during the pandemic, during that first year of the pandemic. Now we are 3 Sundays a month, and occasionally we'll do a fourth special event. And we've always had recordings, but they've not been, once we went to Zoom, it was much easier and this is all because of Don Krieger's wizardry of, archiving and then curating and timestamping on our Facebook group page, which is a public page. We have over 5,000 members worldwide.
I
And, yeah, and in that
Poetry.
in that first month, I remember being excited when we hit like our 300th member, and then like watching it creep up to 500 and then 1,000. Now, folks, as you know, because many of you have been in our intimate Zoom studio, as I like to call it, the most we've ever had in a Zoom room at one time was like 200 people, 200 plus people. That was for our Laureate Love Fest that we had in February of 2021. But what's been amazing and what was amazing to watch during the pandemic was within a week's time to look at how many people had looked at the video. And it would be in the thousands, like for some of our programs. So, and I continuously get, messages from people thanking us for our careful curation of the recordings, that they are very, very devoted to watching the recordings after the fact, even if they are not with us in the Zoom room.
Might be a good time to mention what days and times the poetry gatherings are. Sandra, when do you gather? What day, I guess you gather every Sunday now. You said that.
We're the first 3 Sundays of every month, and we have a different format, and I'm going to put that in the chat again for
At
everybody.
11 a.m. Eastern.
It's 12 noon Pacific,
Okay.
1 Mountain, 2 Central, 3 Eastern,
Okay, I got it backwards.
8 o'clock for usually depending on if it's daylight savings or not. It's 7 or 8 in the UK and Ireland. That's as far as I work my time zones out. And then we always have a time zone calculator for everybody, and we always tell people to check their time zone.
Right. And Chad, when is yours?
I'm envious of the other people who can do it only once a month. I'm such a compulsive poet, host, promoter, and let's just face it, attention whore that I go every Wednesday roughly from 7 to 9. And that's just been my habit. It's been rough to keep up, and it probably keeps me from other readings, which is why you don't see me around, because I keep a job, I'm in a relationship, and there's always something going on when you own a house. So I've been able to keep it, but I know that if the Zoom went down tomorrow, I'd probably be going back to hosting maybe twice a week live if we would even find a live location.
Yeah. Thanks. And Patricia and Roxy, when is yours?
Okay, we're coming up on March 29th from 2 p.m. to 4:30 p.m. We're not going back to Park Plaza because there's no more Park Plaza back room. So it's too much of a hassle dealing with looking for venues. It's too hard, and I prefer being on Zoom because I can go to Cultivating Voices, I can go to Stone's Zoom, go to Billy Brown's, I can go to yours, reading John's, and Jules. I can go to any reading I want because it's more convenient. And we're not only national, we're also international. And our attendance, dealing with an open mic, dealing with a in-person reading, you have to deal with the restaurant. And sometimes when we had the back room, you couldn't always get the back room.
Yeah.
That was a problem. We had to deal with the restaurant noise outside. You don't have. What's great about Zoom? There's no subways. You don't have to worry about the weather. You don't have to worry about the paying for the food.
Yeah.
I think
Not being dumped out of the room and being outside with all the noise. And you don't have to worry about getting sick.
Parking.
I read live at your event years ago, Patricia, and I remember I was actually yelling my poem out at one point so the people in the back could hear, and or the people like mixing a drink would stop or something. It was I mean, you get used to that stuff, and I had to deal with that.
Don't get used to it. That's the problem. And I'm so glad we're on Zoom. We're never going back to what we used to do. Anyway, it doesn't exist anymore since the pandemic. It's gone.
I have a poem about, trying to read over the noise of the cappuccino machine and the sound of the cash register, right?
I'll just say one thing. Maybe before we all read our poems to wrap it up.
Yeah.
And then
Billy was going to say, but we need to get to our poem soon. But Billy, when is Fixed and Free on?
Fixed and Free is on the fourth Thursday evening of each month, except for the Thanksgiving Thursday in November. And then so we don't have one in November. And then in December, to avoid conflicting with Christmas and Christmas Eve, we have it the second Thursday in December. And if you ask me to send you an invitation, all of that information for the whole year is included, including all of our scheduled featured poets for the whole year.
And you do a lot more than host a series. You also put out a journal, Fixed and Free Quarterly, right?
I was going to mention that. And like Brownstone Poets, Fixed and Free has a journal, and 4 times a year, and it's really thick. And so Billy does all that as well. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. We get a lot of representatives from your open mic, Billy. You come highly recommended.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Before we move to asking, I asked each of our guests to read a short poem before we move to the open mic. But I did want to mention that because that notion of recording, how difficult it was in the past, and we have a good friend down in Magdalena, Bruce Holzapple, who did audio recordings and many readings over the years, if not decades. And then Larry Goodell, who may be here tonight, I'm not sure, our Placitas neighbor, he has been really doing such a service, taking old videotapes and audio tapes of readings from the 1960s, 70s, 80s, digitalizing them and putting them on his putting them either on Bandcamp or on his blog. And so it's great to see people doing that kind of work, of archival work, because so much was lost in the days, when it was very difficult to record. So, yeah. Or if things were recorded, a lot of times they just sat in someone's basement and never saw the light of day, kind of thing. So
I do want to say though that I do appreciate the other groups. I have an appendage, an odd appendage of Stone Soup called Oddball Magazine that was founded by Jason Wright, that I helped to edit.
Right.
But in a perfect world, I would probably be putting more print stuff out. So I do appreciate those people like Patricia and Billy, because it was just announced a while ago that the recordings for the live streams for Facebook starting in July are going to start getting deleted. So some people who've been relying on Facebook are going to be having to either download those or store them to YouTube or somewhere else. I guess the lesson is I've learned, especially in recent days, just with the Facebook news and unrelated events, that you can't knock print. You got to keep on documenting all this stuff as best you can. So I do respect Patricia and Billy tremendously for doing what they do. on a very regular basis. And Patricia's been doing it for years, and Billy's been doing it for years. It's definitely a much needed aspect as well. My biggest fear is just all this kind of going away at the flick of a button. Anyone who's been on TikTok, know that
Yeah.
that can happen like that.
That's very scary. Yeah.
Always have your own backup.
Yeah.
You
Always
know,
backup.
Yeah.
more than one source. Yep.
And I did want to just say Oddball is a terrific magazine, and it's a very unusual magazine. It's a lot of fun, and they also have a Facebook group as well. So is a website. So yeah. So let's go around and Roxanne, would you care to read a poem?
Sure. I'd be happy to read a poem. Let me just see if I can find one. I didn't know we were going to be reading poems until maybe a couple of hours ago, and I certainly didn't know we were going to be reading about pandemic or Zoom. So, my apologies. I'm reading from my Hitchcock Abecedarian series, and this poem is called "A Reckoning," and it's after Jamaica Inn, Hitchcock, 1939. Across black crystal waves, a beam of light cascades, calling, but dims as your deck disappears, and everything familiar is engulfed by shadow. Fear grows to hysteria as an invisible army jumps your crew, knocks knives from helpless hands, leaving no man alive to tell of this night, obscene with plunder and pillage, queasy from reek and running, you wretch. Struck from behind, you tumble into the sea, unable to ascend vertical columns of water. The locals' greeting, hardly xenodochial, yet close by, a young girl arrives to tip the scales of justice from 0 to 100.
Thank you. Wonderful. I'll have to rewatch the movie. That was from his British period, right? I think.
Yep.
Patricia, do you have one for us?
Yeah, do you want to hear the pandemic or the recent one?
Either one, whichever.
Okay, because I'm so sick of the pandemic.
Okay.
Okay, I just want to reiterate, I want to thank Roxanne Hoffman for saving Brownstone poets. If it weren't for her, I don't think there would be any more Brownstone poets. She saved my life, and she saved Brownstone poets. So again, give the lady credit. She's my left arm, and she's my right arm, okay? In respect, thank you. Now I'll move on to the poems. Beautiful Bones. This is taken from a dream I had. She had beautiful bones, graceful curves from another time. But the years didn't treat her well. Season after season, she stood like a grande dame, witnessed the birth of another century, not for better, but for worse. Weeds grew around her. Poverty infected her. Like an incurable disease, it jumped from house to house, spreading its anxiety and despair. Even the strongest were not immune. The weather grew grayer and colder. Her sturdy roof weakened, couldn't keep fighting the storms. Her window panes surrendered to leaks. Her swollen ceilings broke down and cried. As water trickled down her walls, her beautiful bones became brittle. The chill inside worsened, and the marble fireplace too tired to comfort her aging owner. Abandonment moved in. Her beautiful bones held on to her curves. She watched greed invite gentrification. They built a green fence around her. They came for her neighbors as well. No remorse for the happiness that created her foundation and earliest memories. Her shabby doors, faded shingles, and broken window frames were dismantled, tossed as trash. Even in death, amid the dust and rubble, her bones were still beautiful. A plain brick box is being built on her unmarked grave. Her beautiful bones now rest in landfill. Thanks.
Thank you. Wow. Yeah. Billy, do you have something you'd like to read?
Yeah.
Mhm. Take it away.
This is a poem that I started writing several years ago, and I've kept updating it because the number of deaths worldwide due to COVID has changed. And my most recent update was last month.
Mhm.
It's called Putting on the World. I'm already in Stafford Briefs desde Honduras, 11,114 deaths, having slept in them. I slather my armpits with Arctic Edge deodorant made by Degree for Men in the USA, 1,216,003 deaths, where right-wing anti-vaxxers increasingly endangered us all. Put a dark blue polyester polo shirt from Turkey, 101,419 deaths, purchased in Lithuania, 9,875 deaths. I step into blue jeans, hecho in Mexico, 334,818 deaths. I think I'll just round to thousands. Tuck in my shirt, buckle my brown leather belt from China, 122,000 deaths, with none reported during many months. I don my dark red sweater made in Indonesia, 162,000 deaths. Pull on my USA socks, tie my Chinese running shoes. I add 2 necklaces, one from New Zealand, one of New Zealand jade. Excuse me, I scrolled a little too far. Sorry, I'll be back. One of New Zealand jade, 3,000 deaths. One from Kaliningrad, amber, 2,000 deaths. Purchased in Latvia, 6,700 deaths. I slip on my Hawaiian shirt made in Guatemala, 16,000 deaths, or my long-sleeved Bangladesh denim shirt, 29,000 deaths. Top it off with a heavy flannel shirt made in Sri Lanka, 16,000 deaths, to avoid being chilly, 63,000 deaths. I insert my German hearing aids, 174,000 deaths. This morning, I put on a total of 2,270,000 COVID-19 deaths, 32% of the global total. Oddly enough, the Sun magazine, to which I've subscribed for many years, has asked for contributions on the topic getting dressed. So I submitted this to the Sun magazine. Hopefully it'll be published. So that shows how I got dressed from stuff all over the world and how they've been hit by COVID.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Billy. Instructive. Yeah, thank you. Chad.
Well, not to be a downer, but I can't mark the 5th anniversary of Stone Soup Going Zoom without reading the first Stone Soup Crouton poem I ever wrote after that reading. Stone Soup Croutons is a series of poems I do based on the open mics. I forget. There's variations, but basically I get impressions from the mic. It could be just one word, could be emotion, could be something that the poem reminds me of, and then I write. On March 18th, it was a simple open mic. I had sent word online asking if people would want to gather for this. Some people said yes, and other people told me to shut up. It was a pandemic, heated moment. But in the end, I believe 8 people showed up for that first gathering, and many more would come, including people like Patricia, Richard Spizak, John Wesick, who I think has been in every single open mic online in existence, and hosts of so many others. But this is what I wrote for the first poem in that series, what I called the Safe Distance edition of Stone Soup Croutons. Day 1 lockdown. Enjoy your tea powder soup. Should have shopped instead of hitting bars that kept open. Home is lonely without food. Never contemplated how empty shells compose soul. Sad enough to miss your bus. Distance to stop outside door feels as close as Mars. Wake up past daybreak, a doe in search of headlight to blind you back to sleep. Hobble to your window to catch last bit of sun and yell it the fuck away. From couch, contemplate dirt and dried out boosts for sustenance. Fade out on couch. You got this.
Yeah. And I love that the croutons concept is terrific. Yeah. Thank you. And let's see, let's go with Jules and then Sandy, and then I've got a short one. Jules?
Thanks, everybody, so far. Yeah, it's hard to believe 5 years since this all started. I did want to add one quick anecdote. In February of 2020, we had our cactus reading. Well, it was at Cactus Brewery, and we packed that place. I mean, we were like over the brim and huge open mic, and but none of us got sick that I know of. So we in New Mexico, the virus is a
We're a little
late
later.
getting
Yeah.
here, but it got here.
It got here, but it took a little longer.
So this is a
think the
pandemic poem.
Texans brought it.
The New York, well, you know, people flying or just anyway. This is a poem called "In Bernalillo, a Blessing," and Bernalillo is the name of the village right next to us. It eventually got published in this anthology, which is the Open Hearted Horizon, the Albuquerque Poetry Anthology, and online a bunch of places. In the palm of my hand arrived spring. I stop the car for bursting wisteria. I can only take a photo in the age of stay-at-home pandemic. I meet my friend in the parking lot of Tractor Supply on 2nd Street. She is low on toilet paper, and I give her 6 rolls and a bag in exchange for some flour. We smile with our eyes. She is wearing a mask in her car. I set the bag in her trunk along with an Easter card. We won't be gathering for brunch this year. The road sign on the way down says, "Stay safe, social distance, shop alone." Even the casinos are closed. The billboard with our beautiful mountains says, "Flatten the curve." Tractor Supply has baby chicks, but I don't go in. Just drive the slow road home. Traffic is light and no one is tailgating or in a hurry. The cattle graze, horses are in the fields, and a guy with a cowboy hat leads his horse out of the trailer. Someone put out a baby goat sign, and the cottonwoods are catching up in green. For this moment, I hold spring in my palm. Home is 2 of us and 2 cats. We're healthy. We know what's for dinner. We eat on our patio. We can hold hands.
Yeah, I love that poem. And we
Nice.
actually, at first Thanksgiving, we had several people drive to the Tractor Supply and we exchanged,
Yeah.
we exchanged Thanksgiving food items from our trunks. It was great.
Parking lot potluck, and then everybody
Parking lot
go
potluck.
back
Yeah.
with their stuff, so you had a chance to share without actually feeding.
Yeah. So if you made some, you didn't have to eat all of it yourself, right? Okay, Sandy.
Andy.
Yeah, I had a Thanksgiving with my friend Tara Hardy, like in my garage with the garage door open. And she was like at one end of the table and I was at the other because of, our immune systems were very compromised. Um, before I read the poem, I want to say thank you to everyone for being here and kind of marking this time and looking back and being able to have some impressions about that, in perpetuity, it will continue to be surreal as the years go on. When we get together to talk about it 10 years from now, it'll be interesting to hear how things changed. But at this 5-year mark, I want to just say before I read my poem, for all the technical things that we have to do to be hosts to come on and do this, whether it's once a month, twice a month, 3 times a month, or every week, the really enduring thing for me has been all the poets that I've met worldwide, whether they are poets that I knew from their books or the beautiful surprise of a person who was reading for the very first time in front of an audience. And having that whole range of experience has been so humbling and really kept my sense of humanity in perspective for these 5 years. So I thank every single voice that I've had the unbelievable pleasure to hear in these 5 years. I'm going to read.
Andy, we met you on Zoom, remember?
I know,
And we met
right?
you in person, and so it's like people
Yeah.
online that you
Amazing.
have to meet them.
It's amazing when we met you last summer in New Mexico and then in Connecticut. I mean, it felt like we'd known you for decades. It's an amazing thing. Yeah.
Don Krieger came to Connecticut. He lives in Pittsburgh, and he drove to Connecticut. This was as the pandemic. I don't think the pandemic is over, actually,
Yeah.
personally,
Never.
but as things were more open, and he talked with me after. He said, "Yeah, somebody asked me what you were like in person," and he told them, he's like, "She's just like she is on Zoom." I thought, okay, I hope that's a good thing. So,
All right.
so my poem is, I wrote this. This poem really tries to kind of anchor my impressions of as things were shutting down and realizing this wasn't going to be a short-term anomaly. And I also wanted to get that completely disorienting sense of what social distancing felt like. So I actually social distanced the poem itself using like kerning. So like characters don't touch. It's a very odd looking poem. Like it's not just that the lines that the stand every line has a double, a double return. It's that the kerning between letters is socially distanced also. The poem is called Cognitive Overload Virtually Invites Disaster 19. Because now I live inside a ghost town, this is the time to release all the secrets in the sidewalk's cracks and write. Let the words congregate like the traffic I once swore at under my breath. Let these lines be stronger than those broken at every supermarket, broken with people hoarding their favored necessities, lost in their unrequited agonies of separation that we'll call social distancing for now. I will permit myself 5 minutes inside. I wander down the cavernous aisles in search of organic brown eggs. Outside, traces of Girl Scouts from days ago still linger with their sashes and cookies. Aluminum cans of tuna might be the only food that saves me. I am determined to say hello to anyone in this ghost town's lonely open store. Someone nearly accidentally approaches. I see the terror in her body's knee jerk of the cart. Even her eyes swerve away. No words exchanged, no whites of her teeth. I try not to blame her. I'm the virus in her shell-shocked eyes, a stranger in an empty Safeway buying tuna. Maybe this is the moment I should start breathing poetry from my lungs. What brand of isolation remains expired on the shelves? Back home, I am reduced to a husk of screened-in work. My employer lures me into learning new platforms at the speed of light because computers are the only thing I'm allowed to touch. In my ghost town, I suspect the screen's glow has mutated into some people's moonlight. If I could, I would ransack some joy. I would smash all the glass screens, make looting my new employment. Meanwhile, a friend writes a poem about being an undertaker. He is not an undertaker, but like me, he's caught in this century's undertow. Will this poem be my final lover? My fingertips grope for the skin of these keys. May you recover some comfort in this day's distant light. And that poem's in my second book that came out during just last year, 2024, The Glass Studio.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone. And I'm
Thank
gonna
you. Remarkable poem and book. Yeah. So this is the Joe Rides Again came out in 2020. So as I mentioned before, it only had a virtual book launch, and it was a sequel to a 2012 book about a time traveling poet, Joe the Poet. So this is called Zooming Joe, and it's the typical 10 lines. Joe does his part during the pandemic, social distancing in the Badlands 100 miles from nowhere, bandana pulled up over his face to ward off trail dirt and the occasional dust storm like we had tonight. Sometimes he'll Zoom with friends, but he doesn't use any app. Just projects his avatar across miles, maybe across years, appearing to old pals as a hologram by their side, or sometimes sitting on the bough of a tall tree. That's Joe. So,
Perfect
anyway,
ending.
we're going to
Yeah, I'd just like to thank everybody again. Thank you
everybody.
all
Yeah.
of our panelists, and we'll you've got info in the chat, and on the recording, I will put the links in as well. And you can find us at our website, poetryplayhouse.com, which has all of the events listed and author info. All the info is in there, including the archives. Thanks.